Welcome to Horsemanship Unlocked. This is a podcast where we explore the horse-human relationship with curiosity, research, and respect. Here we're less interested in blame and more interested in better questions, because meaningful change doesn't always begin with having the right answers. Sometimes it begins with being willing to question what we think we already know. Today's episode asks a simple but important question. What is the difference between compliance and willingness? And how do we know which one we're seeing? Let's talk about why this question matters. In the horse world, we often describe a horse as good when they're being obedient, quiet, responsive, or easy to manage. And sometimes those things absolutely can reflect understanding and trust. But sometimes they can also reflect something else. Shutdown, confusion, exhaustion, or resignation. The difficult part is that those two pictures can occasionally look very similar from the outside. You may see a horse standing still, not reacting, and completing the task. Behavior alone doesn't always tell us the full emotional experience underneath it. So today isn't about accusing individual riders or trainers of doing things wrong. It's about learning to observe with a little more curiosity. Not just, did the horse do the behavior, but how did the horse arrive there? So let's define compliance. Compliance simply means the horse performed the requested behavior. That's it. So the horse loaded into the trailer, the horse stood still, the horse moved forward, the horse completed the pattern. But behavior can happen for many different reasons. A horse may comply because they understand the task, they feel safe, they've been reinforced clearly, they're motivated, or because they've learned resistance is ineffective. And this is where conversation around learned helplessness begins to appear. What is learned helplessness? Learned helplessness is a psychological concept first studied in both humans and animals. It describes a state where an individual stops attempting to avoid or change a situation because repeated experiences have taught them that their actions do not affect the outcome. In horses, this can sometimes appear as reduced responsiveness, flattened effect, low initiative, delayed reactions, or behavioral shutdown. Importantly, a horse in learned helplessness may appear calm. And this is part of why the topic can be difficult to discuss. Stillness does not always equal relaxation. A horse may stop moving while stress physiology remains elevated. Research measuring cortisol levels and stress responses has shown that physical immobility does not necessarily indicate emotional comfort. And again, the episode is not about labeling every quiet horse as shut down. Some horses are naturally quiet. Some are genuinely relaxed. The question is simply, how do we become more observant of the difference? So next, let's talk about latency and enthusiasm. One useful concept here is latency. Latency refers to the amount of time between a cue and the response. A horse who understands a cue clearly will often respond with relatively low latency. But willingness isn't only about speed. It's also about enthusiasm, engagement, and participation. Does the horse seem interested in the interaction? Do they offer behavior? Do they investigate? Do they recover quickly after stress? Do they appear emotionally available? Because willingness often has different quality than simple compliance. There tends to be more curiosity, more initiative, and more expression. Not chaos, not necessarily high energy, just participation. So what does willingness look like? Or what can it look like? Willingness can look different depending on the individual horse, but behaviorally, it may include approaching voluntarily, maintaining engagement without constant pressure, soft, responsive movement, curiosity towards the environment, offering behaviors during training, relaxed facial expressions, quicker recovery after mistakes or stress, and consistency without escalating pressure. And perhaps most importantly, the horse appears to still have agency within the interaction. Not complete freedom from structure, but the ability to remain mentally present inside the process. Because partnership may not mean the absence of guidance, but it may involve the presence of participation. What about human psychology and discomfort? I also think this topic can feel uncomfortable because many of us were taught that obedience was the ultimate goal. If the horse did the task, we succeed. And questioning that can feel destabilizing, especially if we deeply love our horses and genuinely believe we were helping them. But questioning something is not the same as condemning it. Curiosity does not erase care. In fact, sometimes curiosity is a form of care. Science asks us to keep observing, to keep refining, to remain open to new information. And maybe that openness is part of good horsemanship too. So perhaps the question is not simply, can the horse do it? But how does the horse feel while doing it? Because compliance and willingness may occasionally produce the same behavior externally, while representing very different internal experiences. And the more we learn to notice that distinction, the more thoughtful our training conversations can become. So, as always, stay curious, question everything, and let clarity come from the horse.